The MCU will forever be what ignited my imagination. I remember when I first watched a Marvel movie, it was on a plane, which is a perfect way to start your MCU binge. As a matter of fact, this video is sponsored by Emirates. Be good to yourself and fly Emirates. And I absolutely fell in love with this world, these characters, and the way they're like, well, a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as the MCU expanded into this cultural phenomenon, there were these set of Marvel shows that portrayed the MCU in a much more different scope, where instead of fighting aliens in Wakanda, we get to see a whole new side of a blind lawyer defending 10 blocks of Manhattan. And lucky for us, these shows are streaming only on Disney+. Daredevil was a show that we truly didn't deserve. This show feels like a passion project created by comic book fans with serious talent in filmmaking. And aside from Infinity War, this is easily the best thing the MCU has ever made. There are questions you can ask, questions about faith and morality. The Karen and Matt scenes from early season 2 were brilliant, the conversations between Matt and Fisk were enthralling, the Daredevil and Punisher scene on the rooftop was immaculate. It astounds me how the show captures the spirit of the character and the sinister crime lords he has to face. It shows that superheroes are not super and unbeatable, and yet they still make Matt look like a superhero. He survived a falling building for God's sake, yet he still gets tired while fighting in a hallway. He still has fears and morals, which is a perfect balance of being human and being superhero. And even though Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are reprising their roles in the MCU respectively, I don't know if a masterpiece like this can ever be recreated, even if they try. And if this video gets 200 likes, I will gladly make a standalone video about this show because it's just that great. This is a show where you can tell the quality keeps diminishing each season. It's pretty weird. Jessica Jones as a character can genuinely get on my nerves due to how emotionally stilted she can be. And even though Kristen Ritter does a great job, the character herself did feel like she couldn't really stand her own show. Don't get me wrong, the first season is great, where the show discusses trauma as a battle, not against other individuals, but with Jessica herself. If you pull everything back, Jessica's relationship with reality is her main struggle, because throughout her journey she doesn't feel like she's worthy to be called a hero. The best aspect of this entire series is Kilgrave. I love this villain. David Tennant does such a monumental job as this character. No grand plot, no godhood, just a twisted little boy in a man's body who can make anybody do unspeakable acts with just his words. Easily one of the most terrifying MCU villains I have ever seen. But the show kind of declines from there. Season 2 is alright, but the show keeps going back and forth, truly not knowing what to be. Like, there are scenes where she doesn't know what to feel about Kilgrave, but then it goes to a subplot about investigating her past. But we don't have time for that because we gotta go back to the Jerry Hogarth show, who seriously grinds this show to a halt because, very much like Jessica, her character never seems to change. Jessica Jones is a show that sadly falls into the everybody is annoying and unlikable cliche. Speaking of annoying characters, that's where Trish comes in. They did her character so dirty. She had a great character arc in season 1 and then kind of dwindled in season 2, but then we get to season 3, which overall pissed me off. Even in the first season of the show, you can sometimes feel the creative stagnation that would come to later strangle the next 2 seasons. Jessica Jones season 3 is easily the worst season of all the Netflix MCU shows, and with the exception of Jessica, Malcolm, and Eric, there is nothing redeemable here. The big bad in this season is a murderer. Okay, not that bad of an idea when you later find out that he doesn't even have that much of a solid motivation. And then when he goes to jail, Trish kills him, and then they have like this really depressing music for some reason. I mean, it is pretty sad. This guy murdered people, took pictures of them against their will. I'm sad just thinking about it. This show was so woke that it kind of made me feel asleep. Luke Cage is pretty good. Something about this show speaks on so many levels because it's just a fantastic depiction of community. The best character in this show is Harlem. This is the first time I watched a show that gave as much focus to the main character while giving the people surrounding him as much attention. I was always of the opinion that Luke Cage is a better side character than he is a protagonist. And as much as I love him in the comics and Mike Coulter's portrayal, I never really saw him as the main character. Just a really good dude that loves his city. Like, look at the comics, the most famous issues he's appeared in are the ones where he has another character to bounce off of. But this show really changed that perception I had of him. The first season of the show is good, if a bit wonky at times. The first 7 episodes had a fantastic villain with Cottonmouth, until you realize that he's gonna get killed off in order to portray a more prominent character in the MCU, and you have a much more dull villain that I literally forgot the name of while writing this video. The second season was a lot stronger, with the storytelling and pacing getting insane the more it escalates, and it's genuinely really fun to guess what happens next. Something that I love about these Marvel Netflix shows is something the MCU never has anymore, which is that the stakes in those movies are pretty much non-existent. With these shows, you're constantly amazed that they had the cojones to kill off some of these characters. The amount of respect I have for the people that made these shows is beyond anything you can imagine. But I also like that they really knew how to delve into Cage's psyche. The first season is about a man escaping his past, and the second season is about him moving forward, but later realizing that maybe he's moving too far. At first I never thought I'd like this show, but it's actually really underrated and should get way more adoration than it already has. Now, of all the Netflix MCU shows, this seems to be the one that gets the most flack. This is the one that everybody keeps harping on, calling it a disaster of a show, an abysmal atrocity, even though I believe it's alright. Though I agree that the stuff that doesn't work really doesn't, the first 6 episodes of the first season were solid, and I was actually kinda shocked. A lot of these shows have to start with conflict the second the logo pops up, and this show likes to take its time and do a thing I couldn't believe they did, which was a character study. And the action in those episodes were pretty cool. Nothing amazing and at times a little rushed, but it was well done. But then the last 7 episodes are where I understand the hate the first season has. I honestly think the issue with the season was that they were trying so hard to implement the Defender storyline that they forgot to make anyone care about the series. They wrote Danny Rand to be some angry, undisciplined man-child who has trouble summoning his chi. This was the moment where I realized that the advantage that these Marvel Netflix shows have is definitely a disadvantage for Iron Fist. With a lot of these characters, you can ground them in a way to make them feel like normal people, but it's also the magical realism of it all, so there's a specific level where you can kind of buy into it. But the powers that the Iron Fist has are nowhere near as interesting when you tell it in a grittier, street-level format like the others. And that's why I think the second season did a better job. The villains in this season aren't really villains, but people that either want to get revenge for feeling betrayed or feeling like they're doing the right thing, or both. It doesn't have much of the unnecessary filler that you sometimes see in these shows. And filler's fine, a lot of these Marvel shows can take it slow and I love it for that. But there can also be filler where it's a person talking about what they dry cleaned today and it's like, I did not come here to watch a dude looking at his washing machine. But my biggest issue with the season though is that in the Defenders, Matt tells Danny to protect my city. And then now he's like, nah, I'ma give it to Colleen and supposedly have 2 Iron Fists, but at the time I'm not ready for that type of responsibility yet because I'm really trying to figure myself out. I honestly think Danny's appearance in Luke Cage was the first time I saw the character and thought that's Danny Rand, that's the Iron Fist. The zen chill bro that is constantly snacking, wanting to help people, and annoyingly teaching everybody he comes across these weird teachings that nobody asks for. It shows that Finn Jones had that charisma and could have been a great Iron Fist, and whatever happens in the future, I'd be totally down for him coming back. But as is, this show could have been worse, but what we got isn't too bad. This was incredibly mid. I don't think I ever had a more middle of the road reaction while watching The Defenders. Though I do genuinely love all these characters and their interactions, the implementation of the hand is just so dull and forced. And then we have Sigourney Weaver, who's a promising villain until she's killed off, spoiler alert, which was just a piss poor attempt to shock the audience. The hand is just so staggeringly incompetent that I rolled my eyes every time they referenced how old they were. Like, how have they survived this long? Sheer luck has to be the only explanation. In the comics, the hand worships a demon called the Beast that gives them magical powers. And in the show, the Black Sky was set up as this ominous apocalyptic level MacGuffin, but really it's just a slightly better ninja. It would have made sense if they set up that a previous Iron Fist destroyed the Beast and hid its soul under New York or something, just to make it have more impact. But I think the problem with the Defenders and the Netflix shows is that no one had a plan. Jeff Loeb is no Kevin Feige. He's actually a pretty despicable human being is who he is. This miniseries could have been the massive event that we talk about the same way we talk about the Avengers, but all the cumulative flaws that have been piling up with these shows came together like a small, forgettable shrug. Ah, Frank Castle, my favorite Disney character. The Punisher is such a guilty pleasure of mine, and while I do agree with the argument that Daredevil Season 2 is the best season of The Punisher, the 2 seasons we got are actually still pretty solid. The first season is the amalgamation of revenge. Having his family die because of wrong place, wrong time is exactly why he murders all criminals. He's emotionally distraught. He's trying to find closure for what he feels shouldn't have happened, and rightfully so. I think Netflix making Castle more of a tragic figure than just a sociopath is one of the greatest strengths of the show. Comic Punisher is frankly a little bit one note, and seeing him as a conflicted man that's haunted by this horrible tragedy and violence hanging over him felt a lot more compelling. It added some refreshing new depth to the character beyond Frank shoot bad guy. This show discusses morality in a way that isn't as conventional as you'd perceive it to be. Frank believes he's a good person because of the moral code he always sticks by, which is only killing the people that have harmed him and maybe even to other people that he deems good. So to him, that ethically means that after all the people he's killed, he's still a good person. And while season 1 was his nightmare that couldn't stop, the second season was his dream, a new leaf turned over, a moment where he gets to be free, but he realizes that's not who he is. This was a moment where Frank did what he felt was necessary, and his old depraved phase of his life is over. So what's next? Is it settling down, or is it doing something that he knows is inside him and embracing himself as the Punisher? I also have to say that I love Jon Bernthal in this role. He has the energy of a rabid dog gnawing at his chain, and it's that animalistic nature to him that makes him the perfect choice for this role. Anyway, this show is just so fun. Does it have flaws? Yeah, plenty of them, but look at his costume, man. You really shouldn't take this seriously. The Marvel Netflix shows were something special. It felt like one of the most realistic depictions of what people would do if they were granted powers. Shows like The Boys take a more cynical approach, and it worked for their context of parodizing how ridiculous superheroes would really turn out, but these shows were all such wonderfully experimental and non-formulaic explorations of Marvel content. And I truly believe shutting them all down was a bit of a huge mistake, which is a belief that's only compounded by the Disney Plus shows being unable to fully commit to these premises that made them so interesting to begin with. But I think the key theme of all the Netflix MCU shows has always been brought down to trauma. Each story was a whole different emotion and feeling, and each was a different type of pain or pleasure. I mean, granted, it is probably a good thing the series came to an end, because maybe now these characters can truly be canon in the MCU. But that also gives me fear, because if these characters do show up in the grander scope of this universe, will they be portrayed in the same tone, and if not, can they at least pull it off? Because if we do eventually live in a world where an MCU version of Matt Murdock says stuff like that's gonna leave a mark, I'm ending my Disney Plus subscription.